All right, everyone. Now we are heading into our second storytelling session of the day. Just like the last one, I'd like people to be prepared to be engaged in the story, then break up into small groups for discussion and application of your own roles and organizations to this case, and then to come back together as a large group for a presentation by the organizations that supported the family in staying together through shelter and on to permanent housing. This storytelling session features the voice of Elizabeth Knights, a mother to a beautiful daughter and a beautiful cat, a baker, an advocate, a survivor of domestic violence, and a storyteller. She uses her voice and her experiences to advocate for other survivors of domestic violence, people experiencing homelessness, and their pets, and is excited to be participating in My Dog is My Home's Advocacy Day for the PUP Act. As we watch Elizabeth's video, please drop your questions for Elizabeth in the Whova, either in the chat or in the Q&A box. This video and Elizabeth's narrative does contain strong language and recounts her experience of abuse. If you need to step away, and I would encourage you all to really be in your bodies, right? Just as Marilu led us through that exercise, be aware of what you are feeling, but also take a moment before we start the video to think about if you, maybe it's something that you don't want to watch to begin with. But if you need to step away, we encourage you to do so. The video is 14 minutes long, after which we will engage Elizabeth in a question answer session. So please return whenever you feel it's best for you to do so.
Okay, is that all of our dry ingredients? Okay, that's all of our dry ingredients.
No sour cream.
Sour cream's wet. So we're gonna let that mix up real good, for a minute, and then we're gonna add our wet ingredients in the middle. Okay. Okay, we'll do the sour cream first. Oh, Hazel, can you get me a spatula out the drawer over there? It's not open. My name is Elizabeth, and I live with my daughter Hazel and cat Bebe. My first time ever meeting Bebe was it was Halloween 10 years ago. It's kind of ironic actually how it happened. The first time my abuser ever hit me is when he took me to adopt Bebe. It was his apology gift, but I find it so universally correct that, you know, as I walked in there, he immediately walked up to me. He immediately came up to my boots and rubbed his head on my boots. And I said, I'm taking him home. And it's so funny how he became my best friend for 10 years. I noticed I had to leave my partner when he threw me and my daughter out onto the Brooklyn street and said, get the fuck out and take your daughter too. And once he said that, you know, take your daughter too, is when I really knew her life could be now at risk. This man broke my back, broke my head, broke my face. But when he said, get the fuck out and take your daughter too, he didn't care. And that's when I knew it was only going to get worse, never better. My interactions with police during the domestic abuse I experienced was very difficult. Being judged, and also many police officers, they don't have a lot of great training and awareness around domestic violence. One incident in particular, the officer who came onto the scene, who was called by my neighbor, did not even escort my abuser out of the house. He actually questioned me right in front of my abuser. And that was something that was very traumatizing, and it made it very hard for me to speak up for myself. It is very important for police officers to know domestic violence and understand that in that type of situation, you need to remove the perpetrator. One time when police were called to our apartment, he had locked me in a closet. So, you know, a lot of people say, oh, why can't you just leave? But they don't even realize there's so many obstacles of domestic violence, like even just being forced into a closet and, you know, being threatened while police are pounding at your door it's a lot. My interactions with NYPD went while leaving my abuser. Um, it was still stigmatized. This happened in 2019 when I first left. They did give me a lot of resources through Safe Horizons and URI and the shelter. I ended up at Urban Resource Institute after I called the National Domestic Violence Hotline. After speaking with them, they directed me to the local shelter systems in New York City. It took a day to get into the shelter. Luckily, I did have a friend that let me stay at her house the first night after leaving. The day after, we went down to Manhattan Domestic Violence Center, and by that night I was in a shelter, and I had my own apartment, a studio apartment for me and my daughter, my own kitchen, my own bathroom. It was nothing like what people portray shelters to be. It was the complete opposite. It felt incredibly safe. um, I was in a 6 months emergency shelter. Then I was placed into the family shelter, and I lived there through the pandemic for 3 years. The obstacles that made it harder for me to leave was that not many shelters in New York City allowed pets to cohabit with victims of abuse. And also, the stigma around shelters was another reason why, probably the main reason why it was so difficult for me to leave. I didn't really understand that shelters were, especially for domestic violence, is more of like a home. We had our own space, but not knowing that and leaving from, having my own place with my partner for so many years, a stable life and income, leaving and going into the unknown was the most difficult. My second day, while in shelter, I was able to get Bebe and bring him with me. The coordinator of the People and Animals Living Safely program in my shelter, she told me to go to the nearest precinct and ask for an escort. The police officer escorted me to my abuser's home. It was quick, it was safe. We gathered a few more bags of clothes and Bebe, and we went straight to the shelter that night. As I arrived in the shelter that night with Bebe, I was met with everything you could possibly need for cats. A cage, which I never really put him in, um, food, litter, everything you could need. And a lot of these were donations from a lot of organizations. So it's very important that we have this program and have people donating supplies, because when a main reason why women don't leave their abusers is because of their kids, but also because of their pets. There are not many shelters that allow pets. Many women and men will choose to not leave their abuser because they don't want to leave their pet behind. I think that if I did not have a shelter to have Bebe in, it would have been a completely different journey for me. Bebe was so important to my therapeutic journey. Sadly, if I wasn't able to have Bebe, I probably would have had to let him go because the violence was outweighing, you know, the importance of my life. I had to walk away. If I did walk away without Bebe, I don't think I would have been as strong through my healing journey, going through therapy. He is now my emotional support animal, a registered emotional support animal. I would have never had the emotional support to understand my PTSD, to go through it over 3 years. I was in therapy, starting new medications that I didn't even know I needed. Bebe was always there for me. My panic attacks, he would lay right next to me. He was just always there, crying. He would always come up to me and I pet him, I hug him and squeeze him. So I think that if I did not have Bebe, I don't think mentally I would have survived. And for my daughter too. Like, he was so crucial to my daughter's journey. He's always been with us. I mean, I've had him longer than my daughter. He's 10 years old. So it's crazy that my cat has literally raised my child, you know, from baby till now. And he's so important to her life. Having a consistent animal that was with us in our life before shelter made the transition easier for her and had the additional support for her. She is an only child, so Bebe is my second child. All right, let me scrape the sides. Excuse me, baby. I started baking while I started therapy. As a child, I went through 11 years of childhood abuse. And one of my most favorite things to do in my safest place was going to my grandmother's and baking with her. So when I left my abuser into the shelter and started my therapy journey, my therapist said I should start baking. And that's really how it started. It started as therapy and quickly turned into a way to keep myself financially independent from my abuser. I left URI in December 2022, right before Christmas, the week before Christmas. It was the best Christmas gift ever. I had worked for so long to get my space and find my space. In October 2022, I had drove up to Albany and I looked at 10 apartments. I went to the ground apartment hunting and I was determined to find a place. Leaving URI, the staff and the program was so beneficial for even entering into a new era of my life. You know, after being in shelter for so long, even though I had apartments prior to being in shelter and being independent, after losing that independency while being tied to my abuser, it was important to have the support there through the staff. They drove up here with a big van with all my stuff that was in the shelter, you know, all my daughter's toys, our clothes. I mean, it was a shelter, but it was our home. I had a full kitchen of baking supplies. I baked, you know, a business in the shelter basically. So they drove all of our stuff up, and they helped me move in, and they set up a safety plan as well, in case anything does happen. When I first left, I did have money and planned on paying a full year of rent. I had it available, but they surprised me and offered to pay my first years of rent while here. I was extremely grateful for that because I was able to, I came from nothing. I didn't have furniture. So coming here, I had to buy all new furniture instead of paying for rent with, you know, no furniture or anything. I was able to redo my home. And I think that was really awesome because also while I was in the abuse, another part of abuse that was a lot of mental was that I would hang up my artwork from college on the walls and he would tear that down and break my things. So coming here and having my own space and being able to decorate it any way I want, I feel like that college kid, like a 30-year-old college kid, I get to do however I want here. So that's my favorite part. People come in, they're like, it looks like a high school's room, like my room looks like a high schooler's room. I'm like, you don't understand. I didn't even as a kid, I didn't get to have a room and I didn't get to do what I wanted. And I used to be like, my father nailed my window shut. Like that's how bad the abuse was. So it's like, I finally have the room to breathe. I can breathe. No one's restricting me. You know what I mean? I can do literally whatever I want. It wasn't just my abuser. It's like no one is here to tell me what to do. And that's my favorite part. And that I get to hear the birds outside of my garden because no one's yelling at me. Now I get to heal my childhood that I never had with my daughter. And I love it. I love it so much. And he was there through everything, surviving the domestic violence, going through the shelter process, and now here in our new home. I think that he is my spirit guide. I really do. Like, I'm Sabrina and he's Salem. I couldn't see my life without him. Like, I can't. I love him more than not more than Hazel, but more than any human, pretty much. I love him.
Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth. You have been more than generous with your time, and you have put in a great deal of effort to work with My Dog Is My Home to be an ambassador for the cause. So I want to thank you. And I also want to thank the team at Urban Resource Institute for putting us in touch to begin with.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here today, everyone, and listening to my story.
So Elizabeth, before we start taking questions from the audience, I want to ask you first, how are you feeling?
A little emotional,
Yeah.
but I'm okay. I'm doing okay.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for being here with us through it. Um, it seems like advocacy is really important to you.
Yes,
You you leverage your experience and you tell your story to teach others and to push for change. So where does that drive come from?
um, I believe truly it comes from my grandmother and seeing generations of abuse of women. I saw my grandmother go through, mental and emotional and verbal abuse. Um, my my father uh actually raped my mother and attempted to murder her. So he's a registered sex offender. I've never had contact with him. I've just seen generations of women, including my own generation. And having Hazel is something I've decided I don't want it to happen to her. But, statistically, if something does happen, there's so much education and support that I'm now aware of that I'll be able to help and assist her with anything that comes her way.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I remember, when we first met in the context of My Dog Is My Home's 10-year anniversary celebration in New York City, you very beautifully shared your story then live as well, um, to a room full of folks. And the way you ended your story was so powerful because you said exactly that you know domestic abuse, violence against women, sexual assault is so rampant in our society, and you hope that it never happens to Hazel. But statistically, it very well could because it happens so often. Um, and if it does, that she will be in a system both in her family and hopefully in a system more formalized than that too, in a support system um, that is much more informed, much more compassionate, and much more supportive to her than anything that has existed before. So I thought that was just a beautiful way to end and to look to a future where things are different.
That's definitely my goal in my advocacy. We know that intimate partner violence has increased, especially over COVID, and violence against women, I mean, has increased in New York City within the past week. It's a problem.
Mm. Yeah. So I have a couple of questions for you that are coming in through the chat. Elizabeth, and I'm going to go ahead and begin. But if at any moment you need to take a little break, no worries, just let me know.
Okay, thank you.
Um, so here's one question for you. What did you or I do to create a feeling of safety for you after the struggles you had with law enforcement and the stigma around sheltering?
So UI helped us a variety of ways with safety. One, security on site, um, cameras all around in the block area to view everything going on. There's also safety measures taken in place. Individuals that have cars can't park. I think it's 4 or 5 blocks, but it's, you know, New York City blocks are pretty big. You park away to keep the safety and privacy of the shelter. Another thing is that police are never allowed on site. Even if there's a situation and police are called to the shelter, they're not allowed into the premises. So that was those security measures are very important. Having the log system every night of signing in. Some residents, including myself, was a little annoyed because it felt like a control system, but over time I realized it was a way to keep track that we're alive, we're safe, we're checking in every night, and that we didn't go missing. I think that's a very helpful support system as well. What was the other question? I'm sorry.
It was around you or I creating a feeling of safety for you, especially with the stigma around sheltering.
Okay. Um, Well, I'd say that the shelter experience that, I mean, it was quite shocking. It wasn't what I had expected, you know, having my own, even the emergency shelter when I first went for the first 6 months, was just a single apartment for myself, my daughter, and my cat. Just having my own bathroom made me feel human, having my own kitchen, having my own space. It made me feel like an actual human and not someone who was homeless. I think that privacy was very important to my success as well. Just learning my PTSD and learning the triggers and the flashbacks, having my own safe space was essential.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. So once you made the decision to leave, how did you advocate for reuniting with Bebe during your time of crisis?
Well, actually, it was the second day I believe I was there. And I was really upset because my partner was threatening to throw BB outside, which was a tactic he used to do before. And BB is a very bougie house cat. He cannot handle outside. So I was very frightened for him and worried. So I spoke to Lena, who was the PALS coordinator at my shelter, and she said, "Well, we have a pets program. You can go get him now." And I didn't even know that. I was very lucky to be placed into the shelter that I was, whereas only 2% of shelters in New York City allow pets and animals to cohabit. So it was honestly out of pure luck.
And what do you think is missing or can be done better, if anything, from the systems of providers involved in your journey towards independence?
Um, I think they've done such great work. Honestly, through my experience, I went through COVID and the housing crisis was a bit of a situation and still kind of is. It took a long time for me to get out the shelter. I would say if we could speed up a process of getting these people into permanent housing, because you know, even though I was in a safe home in a shelter, it still wasn't my home. And I was very grateful for my home, but you know, just having your own keys that you don't have to turn in every night, having your own space, it's different. It hits way different. And I think I was depressed for a bit because of the extended length it took me to get out of the shelter.
And I have one more question for you, Elizabeth. So you have an audience listening to you today made up of people who work in homeless services and also domestic violence services, and people who work in animal welfare. It's kind of a unique audience. They don't get together like this frequently. So, what is one thing that you want them to know, or what's one piece of advice that you have for this special cross section of people who are interested in supporting people and their animals staying together?
We definitely need more shelters that allow this, that allow habits, excuse me. Continuing to donate, food, having that. I mean, when I walked away, I had $30. That's it. And a couple bags of clothes. Coming from that, and the first shelter I was in did not have a food pantry. That was the emergency shelter, but they quickly did add one after I left there, and the full stay one had, or that I was in for the 3 years, had a food pantry. I found the food pantry to be very helpful. All the services, childcare services, therapy services, even just having these events for the children and people staying on site just made it seem more of a home. I think that if you can make these shelters be more of a home feel, it will help increase these victims' success. I think way more. I mean, halfway through my journey, they gave me a couch, they put a TV on my wall, and I heard when I was leaving they were giving everyone microwaves, and I was like, this is great. And all these resources are helpful because everyone has their own story of domestic violence, and some people have support, some people don't have any support. So all the types of support and donations is really, really important, especially clothing donations.
Thank you for that very concrete bit of advice. I think that's super helpful. Well, thank you for being with us also, Elizabeth. We learned a lot from you. And I just want to commend you for putting yourself out there over and over again for the benefit of others, really, and for advocacy. So thanks, Elizabeth.
Thank you for giving me a platform. I appreciate everyone listening to me, and I hope that I can make a difference with my story.
You definitely have, no question about it. Thanks, Elizabeth. So now I'd like to give you all instructions for the small group discussions that we are about to enter. Just like last time, after we close this room, we would like for all of you to click on the next item in the agenda in Whova, which is called Elizabeth and Bebe Case Study Small Group Discussion. From there, you will be placed into a breakout room with a few other people. Again, the small group you end up with is random, so you will be in discussion with professionals across different geographic areas, across professional fields, and also different roles. And this is to facilitate interdisciplinary learning and networking. In your small groups, we would like for you all to discuss two important questions. Can you identify the systemic barriers involved in this case? And also, what kinds of resources can you call in to assist with this case, both human and animal? Where might your organization fit in to fill these gaps? So if you click the agenda item for the small group discussions in Whova, these questions will be found in the session description. You don't have to memorize them. You don't have to write them down. They will be there in the session description if you click on the right agenda item. So again, we're going to close this room. You're going to click on the next thing in Whova, and then you'll be put into a breakout room. And then we'd love for all of you to come back into this main room once your small group is over. And we'll be hearing from Lena Cohen from Urban Resource Institute and Christopher Wilson from the ASPCA on how they supported Elizabeth and Hazel in being able to stay with Bebe in shelter and eventually transition to permanent housing, as well as how they collaborate to assist other families in similar situations. So have a great discussion and see you all back in the main room, which is here in 30 minutes or at 4 p.m. Eastern time. Have a great conversation, everyone.